Waranjari Wiramik, Waranjari Balakut, Nungodjan Kiripik, Nungodjan Pupupnak Warenik, Nungodjan Bolaru Waranya, Nungodjan Murup Kalara Birarang, Waranyut, Nyam, Nungodjan Liwik Bolok Nugulik Ba, Lalal Ba Gugung Nugulik, Nungodjan Kiripik Troy. My name is Mandy Nicholson and I'm very pleased to be part of this project. I don't know how we were matched up with all the details, but I think we were a perfect match for this particular project. I'm so glad that we could do this artwork to honour the work that you do with children. I feel very honoured, so thank you. Nyungodjan.
The two commissioned piece of artwork that we've got with us today, we're going to introduce to Ozchild and circulate around all of our offices so all of our staff can experience them. And I think what it will do is very significant. For one, it represents some Aboriginal leadership, very, very strong leadership of a male and a female leader here in Victoria. All of the offices where we deliver services are on their country. And it's really important for our staff to be able to stand and reflect and take on board what they see in those images and what that means then in terms of our own journey to cultural competence and the support we give to our vulnerable children and young people, many of which of course are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders.
The artwork for me and for Ozchild is a symbol that will be in our foyer. It will be engaging in and of itself. You'll be looking at it and going, wow, that's really impressive. I wonder what that's about. And the idea is then to engage in that narrative around, well, who are these people in these portraits? And that narrative will then lead us into a conversation about understanding who these leaders are, what they've done for their people, and how they've been working in a dominant culture that is not supportive of them.
As a leader, you got to not only do it, but also showcase that you can do it. And it's possible for anyone else to do it, regardless of what age you are. I'm from Shep, Yorta Yorta. Currently live in Bendigo. Been here for studies. Been here for 4 years. I'm studying Masters in Teaching Secondary, and I've already completed a Bachelor in Creative Arts there as well.
Well, my mob is Wurundjeri Willem, and it's a patriline within the Wurundjeri Balak. And I also have Dja Dja Wurrung connections through my great-great-grandfather and also Tanarong. I'm a visual artist, but I also do a whole lot of other things that sort of relate around art, but also language reclamation. For this project, I'm a mentor for Troy. I didn't know Troy at all before this, so we connected over the phone and emails and Facebook and things like that. So we looked at each other's artwork and things. So I'm really glad that he was chosen because I really like his art style.
I think the challenge with this is the fact that I've seen her work, but I haven't seen her work inside a studio. And so the only connection we actually have is the fact that our Indigenous culture comes into play there. And with Indigenous culture, we share the same values. You've got to be confident in yourself, and for a person to trust you and your work, well, they got to know that you even trust yourself before they can even trust you. So this artwork was made in collaboration with me, another Indigenous artist, Janet Bromley, and the Bendigo Senior College. Here in this work, it's more I mentor the kids, draw that concept, kind of tweak it a bit to further develop it. I guess with this project, it's the same kind of steps, except this time I'm not overseeing Mandy's work. It's more I'm giving her full trust, like my full trust into her work, and she's doing the same for me. I believe that me and Mandy will be able to do it, no worries, because we have that common ground of culture.
I'll be doing the airbrush style to commemorate and honour two of Wurundjeri leaders, Ani Winnie Quagliotti, Ni Terik, and Simon Wonga, who was a leader, Narangeta of the Wurundjeri people in the 1800s.
So Auntie Winnie, she's been a part of the Indigenous community down Melbourne Way as a source of inspiration for young Indigenous women. You know, to be there for their healthcare. You know, she developed the first childcare centre for Indigenous kids, and you know, Uncle Simon, he was there for the treaty, and I was also responsible for gaining back some land for one of the tribes that lost their lands. And picking both of them, it was a great option for me and Mandy, because our connection to those sorts of areas, the things that they did, shows evidence of progression for Indigenous people.
I think it's going to work out really well, where it's got the element of the strong leaders looking in on these two panels, looking in from the side, and Troy will be creating the background that honours and links to the life of these two great leaders. I'm going to print the black and white photos of Auntie Winnie and Simon Wonga, and then I'm going to project the photo with an overhead projector onto the MDF board, and then just put dots where the shaded areas are. So I'm not tracing the face, but I'm creating a template that I can use when I reference the actual photo. And before I do all of the actual airbrushing though, I'll mask that off and I'll give the panels to Troy to paint the background. I chose Auntie Winnie is she's my grandmother's sister, so she's my great auntie, and I remember her as a child. We used to go to all these Wurundjeri meetings all the time, and she's a legacy for us. The picture of Auntie Winnie there is really definitive of what she was like as a person. She's standing defiantly in her possum skin cloak and her emu feathers. When the tall ships came, she was saying basically, well, there were people here before the tall ships and I'm not going to celebrate it. And there's a picture of my daughter right next to her from a few years ago, and now she is taking after leaders like Auntie Winnie in teaching other people about her culture and her language through dance and song. And we are both inspired by Auntie Winnie. And Simon Wonga here in a picture that I don't often see out and about. It's a very strong image of him, and I really think a lot of my people back in the 1800s, they were in these photos, but none of them are smiling, because you could think of the time that they were in. It's where a lot of land and a lot of the people were getting killed from illnesses and from massacres and things like that. And I just love how he's standing there posed up, really strong. He was one of the leaders in creating friendships and relationships with the non-Indigenous pastoralists around Hillsville and Warrandyte. I know that traditionally it would be the uncles that would help raise the community of young boys, and it would be the aunties that helped raise the community of young girls. So if he's creating friendships with the non-Indigenous population, he was a very strong and respected leader for all the young men and boys in the mob as well. Auntie Winnie had connections to Camp Jungai. She was one of the founding members of that area up there in Tanarong country, and I even remember going there many years ago, and it's the first place that I ever danced.
I understand Aunt Winnie, who's in your work, used to come here and use this as a meeting place as well.
To honour her in there's a portrait of her,
Yes.
and she is probably my inspiration as one of the standout elders, and I've grown up around a lot of strong women, and she's the standout.
And today you're here looking at the site, perhaps maybe getting some inspiration here for the actual work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, living in the city, you don't hear this beautiful river, birds and the silence as well. You don't have that silence.
where I live, so it's really culturally draining to live in the city. So I always love coming out on country and Tanarong country here.
Dad used to work here a few years back, and I worked near doing the gardening and landscaping. Yeah, and Dad brought me down here around about when I was 6, 7 years old.
Fantastic.
Yeah, got a weird connection with this place.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's part of the interesting thing, is all of these little connections coming together.
These places here create those conversations.
Yes.
And those conversations create those connections. So
Yeah.
these kind of places, Camp Jungai is a place where all the connections are made, pretty much. Through those poles, when I walk through, it's like a timeline.
Yeah.
And even the trees themselves, like, they're huge trees. And so they've obviously been here for years. And just thinking, like Dad used to work here when these things were here too. So seeing these trees and seeing the same trees that Dad's seen, like the leaves here are a lot bigger than I've seen.
Oh,
So
right.
I was thinking too.
Yeah,
Very good.
they're huge.
Because I know that's going to be part of your work, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'm paying attention to the shape of those, how big they are, and really going to emphasise that inside the artwork. Because once this project's done, this artwork's done, you'll be able to like walk past it and people ask about it. It's like, yeah, I was there at Camp Jungai when they were doing it.
That's right.
Seen the landscape, experienced it. So yeah, it's interesting that the story itself, like the concept and the idea is developed from a story, but then the story is then continued through us
That's
coming
right.
here and experience these kind of places.
Coming to Camp Jungai, I do see it as a metaphor. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a place that's Auntie Winnie has used as a meeting place for her. We weren't even aware of that when we first commissioned this work. We arrive here and discover there's a pole at the front that's been painted by Koori kids who've been supported by Ozchild. So it's almost like a mosaic. The pieces are coming together that connect Ozchild to the cultural heritage of Aboriginal people in Victoria. Camp Jungai is an important place, a contemporary place for Aboriginal people in Victoria, and it's a good place for us to make a connection to through the artwork, through Aunt Winnie, and through the artists that are doing the work for us.
The project itself it's a great opportunity for Indigenous people to really showcase that connection to land and that connection to leaders and family. It's just all these little connections, and this is just it's like a reflection of Indigenous people, Indigenous family too, like all those family connections we have.
It'd be really interesting to know where all these people are now.
So they do a lot of art stuff here, don't they?
Looking at these photos makes you realise, we had all the adults coming together and, really striving to get culture happening again.
Yes.
And it's this generation's turn now to do it.
And they're obviously doing traditional practices because they're all boys here learning to play didge as well.
You haven't spotted your dad yet?
No, I haven't spotted him. I'm looking for the eyebrows.
I think these photos really show what Camp Jungai has done over the years, because like in these two particular photos you can see a heap of leaders that are here yarning. 60s and 70s was the time that all the trailblazers for our generation were really active. And seeing all the other photos with all the young ones in there, you can see that they would be gaining so much cultural knowledge, and they would be getting a firm cultural grounding by being here. People are painting up and playing the didge and teaching kids how to play the didge and stuff. I think that enables kids that don't have access to any cultural activities. It gives them that cultural base, so they feel culturally safe to be around other Aboriginal people that are mentoring them in cultural activities, and then they can go back to their communities. People say, oh, you're Aboriginal, are you? And they'll say, yeah, I have done all these cultural activities, so I can say, yes, I am Aboriginal, and be very proud of it.
As a child, you need to know where you belong. You need to know that you have a family. You need to know that you are safe. You need to know that you can have fun and enjoy life and not expect to have any serious consequences for you just because you're a child. When we look at that from an Aboriginal context, what we find is that there are very few reference points for Aboriginal children to actually say, this is who I am, this is where I'm from, this is my culture, and that I am part of a strong and healthy society. For the dominant culture in Australia, those reference points are everywhere. There's so many of them that we're not even really aware of them. When we look at the TV, when we look at social media, when we look at news reporting, they are full of white reference points. At the end of the day, it's very easy for us to just say, well, that's what life is, and it's a pretty good reference point for us. And when we have challenges to face, these things are there to support us. For Aboriginal young people and children and families, those reference points are not there. So when they are faced with challenges, whether it be mental health, whether it be education, whether it be connection to community, these reference points are not there, and it's very much harder for them to come to terms with how they are going to grow and develop as children and people.
The full picture of her she's in a cloak, but also with a lot of emu feathers on and a couple of feathers going up. So I wanted to make it my own by basically taking the feathers out and referencing just a possum skin cloak. So I just got some possum skins to see how the fur sort of sits. I don't know if you can get in there with a fine brush and paint all over the grey, so you can see it from the angle that it's there's no paint there, but I've done the airbrush over. Wow. That's so cool. Actually love it. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I know that he's got pride in his work, and you're very meticulous, exactly like what I do with my artwork. Has to be perfect. You obviously take a lot of pride in what you do, and you don't rush anything, and it means a lot. You can tell.
I think I spent close to 3-4 hours on this. Initially, you get confused between is it a tree or is it a river or whatnot. That's why it has a river body and it has a tree kind of ending. And then that's the mission that Uncle Simon made.
You could see the life and livelihood of his mob failing because of all the land grabbing and all the gold rush and everything. So he said, how can we work together? And these huts would be that were built for the families to live in. Yeah. It sort of happened in the 1800s where people would live in huts like this with clay floors, and because it was so cold and they weren't given enough blankets, a lot of them would die of something called consumption. A lot of our leaders died. When the wattles are in bloom, we say, we just got to honour our leaders and remember them. I'll get the pencil and I'll mark in the dark shaded areas. I'll turn the overhead projector off, and then I'll get the airbrush out and just shade in all those dark areas, and then come over with the grey and the white to put the highlights in.
Pretty much going to do the same design that I did on Uncle Simon's painting. The only change really is going to be the landscape and maybe also the direction of the curves and lines of the tree and the river.
It's a really emotional piece for me because she's such a powerful woman. Yeah, my grandmother's sister. The world these days creates all of these avenues where it drags these young kids away and they forget who they are, they forget their culture, they forget their roots. I think it's important to create leadership in our young girls, in my instance, and the young men, because the roles that you gain throughout your life traditionally, they aren't happening anymore. So we're trying to bring that back. You teach them from the youngest of ages, and then they'll go off and do their own thing, but eventually they'll realise, oh, I've got this firm cultural grounding. They always have that opportunity to come back and remain active in their cultural practices, language, dance, and all of those things.
We have to acknowledge what we don't know. We have to acknowledge that we see the world through a particular lens, and that lens really doesn't have any Aboriginal people in it.
The more we have, the better. Indigenous leaders, young and old, but mainly young, to prove to the elders that they can step down in confidence. Someone can take over. I think it's very important for Indigenous Victorians to take on any leadership, whether that's leadership inside a footy team, leadership outside the footy team, in the community, in a classroom, proving to everyone else that they can do it, pretty much. every other Indigenous person.
People ask me to do language or dance workshops. I actually say I'm stepping back from that now and I'm allowing my young girls to step up. As a young child, I wasn't confident at all. I didn't have opportunities culturally as my young girls do. So now they're out there speaking at 14 years of age, where when I was 14, I was like this shy little thing in this shell that someone looked at me, I went bright red. So culture is the key to bringing them out confidently as young women.
Ozchild has a very deep respect for the traditional owners' cultural diversity and gives recognition to all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as employees, carers, families, children and young people, a feeling of belonging and acceptance within our organisation.
The interesting thing about this artwork in inspiration is the fact that we didn't really have to go far. For Indigenous people, our culture is the heart of everything. And that goes for any Indigenous person you ever meet.
A lot of heart and passion being put into it, and it represents the connection with elders and history within the community, and also connection with the land. And it's a very powerful expression, I think, for those when the art is hung with pride within Ozchild. It'll send that strong message.
I think the main thing is for new people coming into Ozchild is that there is a real need for self-examination about how you currently think about your role, how you understand Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal people, and the commitment that you're going to make at a personal level to address that gap and to come with us on the journey of building our capability in this area.